Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake Edwards. This is the Weekly Pill. Today's episode is number 4, and we have an extremely talented, important guest today, Mr. Chase Hughes. Chase Hughes is a retired Navy enlisted individual who spent his entire career developing a program now that is shaping the human intelligence community and the human persuasion community around the world. He is someone who I had the pleasure of being a student in one of his full-day courses. And I now have become someone that is just infatuated with his work because he's changing lives. He's helping people learn that leadership through support might be the number one thing that you need as you grow and continue through life. Chase has 2 books out. One of them I've read, the Ellipsis Manual. The other one, I have it on the list of many, and I promise Chase I will read it. But I want to introduce Chase Hughes to the show, and let's take it away. So Chase, good morning or good afternoon. How are we doing today?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. I kind of wanted to share a little bit about your background before we get started. And why don't you go ahead a little deeper and kind of talk about what got Chase to where he is today as either a young boy, teenager, young sailor, senior enlisted sailor, and then now present. Can you go into that for a few minutes?
Yes, I was 19. My first job in the military was very different than the recruiter told me about. It was very different. And it was scraping paint off of the ship, like rusted paint and stuff. And I thought, I don't want to do this. This is pretty bad. And when we're both active, when you're younger, you see like a master gunnery sergeant or a master chief, and you think, wow, if that guy retires, he's going to be like the CEO of Continental Airlines or something. There's nothing higher than that to us. I had a master chief of mine who retired, and a few weeks later, I was in a store which is now out of business called Circuit City, and I saw him in there alphabetizing CDs, albums, and he had on like a Navy veteran hat, and I lost sleep over that. And I thought, I don't ever want this career to be the best thing that's ever happened to me. And it really hit me hard that that's going to be his lifeline, is just to say that I used to do this. And I never wanted that to be me. I wanted to continue to outgrow the military. And later on, I'm talking to a girl at a restaurant, and I asked her out. I was probably 19. And she said no, like didn't want to go out with me. And I went home. I typed into Google. I actually typed the phrase, how to tell when girls like you. And it led me down this wormhole of body language and people reading stuff. And I got obsessed with it. And I think, as a kid, I think I might have had some social anxiety there, because the more I was able to read people, the more I understood. I could see fears and insecurities and, just these little personality weaknesses. I never felt superior to anybody, but it let me know everybody else is just as screwed up as I am. So it made people more human. It made them easier to talk to, easier to approach. And I became addicted to it. And over time, I started using it in the correctional type of environment for a long time, and then started implementing new interrogation strategies based on a lot of this stuff. And I wanted to develop something completely different that's never been done before, as far as persuasion, influence, and people reading all kind of get put together into some kind of a system, which hadn't been really done. And that's what led me to it. And then my final few years in the Navy, I worked as a captain of a little sneaky boat. And we run intelligence operations and stuff. And it really brought it home that this stuff had the potential to save lives if we're using this in intelligence interrogations or human intelligence operations, or even PSYOP. The Army's PSYOP command makes a tremendous difference around every war zone that we're in, and even the non-war zone areas that they operate in make a huge difference. And I thought this stuff could really change the game, and that's kind of what led me here.
Awesome. I'm going to take a note right down to bring this up later for PSYOPs, because I don't want to interrupt too much right now for this subject, but I'm going to get into that about something I had experience with PSYOPs in combat. You know what? Why don't I just bring it up right now real quick?
Let's do it.
So PSYOPs absolutely is a variable game changer on the battlefield. So we had them at nighttime during the Battle of Fallujah. We had them playing cat noises. So we shut off all the power in the city. So at night we go firm as Marine soldiers. We have NVGs, but we don't have advantage because it's not our yard. It's not our home turf. So we go firm, and we be sitting there firm in our safe house, and all we hear is like crazy cat noises off the Psyops vehicles. And we were messing with the enemy completely. And also Psyops would do a lot of stuff during the day. Like they play from their vehicles, Ichiba, 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 Ichiba and Fallujah. And, attention. And anyway, just had to share that because I've never heard anybody bring that up to where Psyops is absolutely a game changer. And I didn't even think about that until you mentioned that.
Yeah, they definitely level the field before an operation and during an operation to make sure everything is primed and ready for whatever work needs to be done out there. It's a really cool system.
Yeah, it is. So real quick, can you talk about, did you lat move at all in the Navy, or did you stay one job the entire time for your whole career?
I lat moved a lot.
Did you?
A whole lot.
Nice. I wish I would have done that. I wanted to get into HET team or, HET after experiencing the exploitation guys in combat. They literally just owned whatever they wanted to. Het rolls in and they get out of here. This is our land.
They're the dudes wearing like flip flops with their uniforms, stuff. Yeah,
that's good. So, can you talk a little bit about where does Psyops working in that field, like yourself? What kind of training do you guys get to experience?
Well, that Psyop is 99% Army folks. And that whole field, I think, is fascinating because it's public relations at its heart. Its bread and butter is PR. And the guy who really invented PR, his name's Edward Bernays. And I'll tell you a cool fact about him as soon as I finish this. But he's the guy who invented a campaign called Torches of Freedom to make women smoke Virginia Slims cigarettes. He's the reason why butter is dyed yellow. He's the reason why bacon is popular. He's the reason the Marlboro Man was invented. He's the reason the Department of Defense is called the Department of Defense and not the Department of War anymore.
Sure.
So he wrote this seminal book called Crystallizing Public Opinion, and then wrote another book after that called Propaganda.
Awesome. And I can't wait to get to this guy.
Yeah, he was the guy that revolutionized how to change a lot of people's opinion very quickly. And he was actually Sigmund Freud's nephew. And the reason that Sigmund was kind of brought over here was Edward Bernays.
Interesting. Well, all right, let's real quick, because you're obviously a wealth of knowledge. Okay, let's go into briefly the perspective of psychological. Why would we go from Department of War? Because I'm very familiar with this for some of the things I've done in my line of work. Department of War versus Department of Defense. So let's, real quick, let's talk about that for a minute. What's the big shift of that?
It was the cultural perception of what they did. And I think that the government wanted to do that, because it was more palatable for the people to say, I don't want to do a lot of war. I want to defend our country. And that helped people to communicate with their congressmen, and that fled up to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that eventually fled up to the Defense Budget Committee, who was willing to probably spend a lot more money because of public opinion.
Sure. And it's kind of like the phrase that I have a friend of mine who was a SEER instructor after the Marine Corps. We worked together, our last government contract. And he used to always say, perception is 9/10 of reality. He liked that term.
So true.
So I think that's a good, for Department of Defense, what better term to use to replace from what we were using? Because, we both know from being post 9/11 guys, the Vietnam vets, those guys got treated like dog crap for many years. And they still haven't been granted the respect that they need from what they were treated as. And, we do thank God for our generation. We owe it to them big time. And we really need to remember that they paved the path forward for us to have this respect that we get to have now back home.
Indeed.
Because, you can't grow in the fire. And those guys were in the friggin' trenches of the fire.
Yeah.
And, I just lost my uncle. I think I told you this, Green Beret combat medic. Just he couldn't take the body. His body was shutting down from Agent Orange and heart disease. He took his life back in July. And he Vietnam veteran. And, he made me the person I am. He helped me learn how to grow post-combat from getting out of the fire and letting life be something to look forward to instead of living in the past only.
Yeah. Sorry that happened, man.
I appreciate it, man. It's, life's tough, man. And we got to support each other. Like, I love what you say, leadership through support, because some of the best things in life come from your support for others outside of self.
Yeah.
And
I think, one of the best leaders I've ever met, or probably the best leader I've ever met in my life. He's still on active duty. I think he is a 2-star admiral now. And his name's Brad Cooper. And he was just kind of emergency promoted to Atlantic Fleet, the Atlantic Fleet guy. And he promoted a sense of, he was my first CO I ever had, and just promoted a sense of stewardship and ownership over your environment. He always had time for everybody. He was never rushed for anything. Looking at him from any perspective, it looks like he has 79 hours a day to get all of the stuff done. And he's never stressed out about anything. He's got time for everybody. And, he grew up with a younger brother who had a severe mental disability. And I think that injected some empathy into him that's just uncommon for a lot of people. So he kind of grew up with that. And so that was just his natural being, was just support for everybody. He had a tremendous amount of support. And I think that's how he earned as much respect as he does today. He's just an uncommon human being.
Wow. So have you ever talked to him about what you just said? Have you told him your perspective of his self one-on-one outside of uniform?
I've got him on LinkedIn, but I just always doubt. I always see him on LinkedIn. I'm like, yeah, he's probably not going to respond if I message him.
All right, we'll have to get him this. We'll have to get him this recording if we approve of it before we publish it, because that's important, and you got to think about if we grew up. You're like a year older than me, but we grew up where sports was like very important.
Yeah. For
your heroes in life. And those that had high influence over you. And, nowadays, I think sports is tough because, especially with COVID, but for kids, I think it's an important lesson to remind them that there are definitely some people to look forward to as mentors, people we can learn from outside of the athletes. And, I hope with technology boom, because you and I didn't have that growing up, like technology it was close. It was getting there. Like I remember the first Motorola flip phone. I was in like 10th grade. The one with the nice leather case,
Yeah.
You like pull the antenna up, and it was cool to have one of those.
Yeah, I had one.
Yes, but like now with technology, like my nephew, he's we're trying to get him into the Naval Academy. He's 17, 11th grade. He's an incredible rower. He was 3rd place nationally rowing tandems in ninth grade. He's a mountain biker too, just crushes kids in competition. But COVID's been hard for him, but he loves Jocko. Like, he friggin' loves Jocko. He loves David Goggins. You know, he's now been watching some of the podcasts I've been on. And, you know, I'm just like this little friggin' rock that just wants to make an impact in the world I have influence over. But I'm so proud of him that he's not just caught on sports figures as his influencers out there. So technology, man, and you're going to be one. You are one of those. There's so many people that are gaining great knowledge from the social media platforms and the books and the publishings that you're doing. And I just want to tell you right while we came recording, like, I'm proud of you. And thanks, man. As an American, as a warrior, as a, you know, post 9/11 warrior as well, you know, you're just keep growing because you're doing it, man. You're doing great stuff.
Thank you.
Sure.
Likewise.
Thanks. Thank you. Now, purpose-wise, you kind of shared that. Where do you feel like where did you take the turn to get into the field you're in now? Like, at what point of your life were you like, okay, I'm all in, like Texas Hold'em game. I'm all in. This is what I'm doing. Could you talk about that a little bit, and also the challenges that you had, the day-to-day grind, you know, that I call it, like just getting through and get hit in the face and standing back up. Could you talk about that a little bit, of what challenges you've been through to keep that path of purpose?
Well, I did, when I was on active duty back in the day, I did a keynote talk during a lunch at a Chamber of Commerce meeting in a tiny town called Cleveland, Texas. And I talked about this, you know, this military behavior stuff, because I mean, just like, if you talk about a 9-line, like, all of us know like what a 9-line is, but you talk about that to a civilian, it's like, it's groundbreaking. You know, everyone stops talking. They all want to hear about it. So I'm talking just about some basic military stuff that I'm teaching. It's behavior profiling, a little bit of authority and influence. And this guy approaches me afterwards, and he owns like 6 or 7 car dealerships. And he said, do you want to come train all of our people at the car dealership? And my first instinct is like, no, this is stuff that's for military. And he's like, no. Yeah.
Yeah, you were making yourself single dimensional.
Yeah, I was. And he said, no, this is just human to human interaction. He says, if you're a mom, you're in sales. If you're a military interrogator, you're in sales. If you're a parent, you're in sales. And I never considered that until that day. And then I got even more excited about it, because I thought I could help so many more people. And I was one-dimensional until that day. And I was getting out of the military just 2.5 years ago. And I was terrified because I wanted to start my own business. You know, my book had just hit the bestseller list. So I'm saying, all right, well, if I can do a book, self-published, I didn't do any marketing for it really, and it hit the bestseller list, maybe I can start a company. And as I'm getting out, everyone's like, dude, you need to write a resume. You need to get a government contract job. You need to do something that has some reliable income. You need to get your resume ready. And I knew that if I wrote a resume, that I would use it, that it would always be, I would say, well, I could always just, you know, fall back on it. And to this day, I haven't written a resume. And I got out and I said, this is it. I'm going to sink or swim. I'm not applying for jobs. I'm not going to do anything. And getting into the beginnings of it. And even to this day, I work 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. I'm out of bed at 4 a.m. every single day. And I write books from 4 to 11. And I do business stuff from 11 to 9 p.m. That's 7 days a week. And
wow.
But that's possible because I found something that I like. I'm excited doing all of this stuff. I enjoy doing it. And it's, I'm by no means am I one of those guys that's like, oh, you need to hustle. And that's like the answer to everything. I'm disgusted with people who say that. I'm saying, like, I was so scared that I was going to be broke. I was terrified. I'm not going to make a house payment. So I just worked. And it was, the motivation came out of fear back then, and now it comes out of inspiration now.
Sure. Hey, real quick. All right. So first of all, I don't want to lose this. Explain what you mean about the hustle thing that you don't like.
Somebody saying that hard work is the answer.
Sure. Sure. No, no, efficient work, strategic work is the
Sure.
answer. Go
The
ahead, but go
the
ahead.
the kids who build iPhones are hard and strategic workers as well, and they don't make much money either. And they work the same hours as a CEO entrepreneur. So people are saying, well, you need to just put in the work. I think that there's a huge missing piece there. There's tons of people who didn't put in much work and were massively successful. There's tons of people who put in more work than anybody else and didn't become successful. I think it really boils down to whether or not you have something that people want and you're actually passionate about it. That comes through in your eyes. It comes through in your voice. Everything that we're doing. If we're transferring that to somebody else, that's the important part. Is someone else going to like it? I was talking to my editor very recently, who edits all of my books, and he said, I was worried about, like, well, I don't understand how adjectives and consonants and all this. I don't understand any of that language. I've written 4 books. I don't understand that language to this day. And he goes, Chase, do you remember the last award you saw for #1 best written author? And I said, no, it doesn't exist. And he's like, exactly. There's only a #1 bestseller. That's all that matters.
Sure.
So you've got to have some skin in the game, and you've got to be doing something that's worthwhile for you, that actually inspires you.
No, I agree. That makes perfect sense. But I want to add to that too a little bit with, okay, let's rewind a little bit. Chase said 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. everybody. Okay. First off,
there's some breaks in it.
First off, Jocko, that means he's getting up 30 minutes before you. Okay. Second off, like Chase Hughes here, as what you have control over, Chase, that's hustling for yourself.
It is.
So I would just say, for personal wise, you're hustling, you're putting in the work. And I want to bring this up because I have not been the person I'm not the person I've always been at times in my life. And this is a funny story. I was assigned a pet rock as a Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps. His name was PFC Rock. And anytime we were in formation, PFC Rock had to be down and aligned in formation with our squad. And it was for me to learn accountability over myself, because I showed up late to formation. We were doing the IED lanes at Sapper School. And I showed up, I passed out, went back to my room instead of going to chow. I passed out and my alarm didn't wake me up. So anyway, I bring this up because you got to show up for yourself first in life to even have the chance to complete your passions. So Chase, getting up early like that, man, you are hustling, but you're also the analogy of you're putting in the work in a strategic strategy way, because you know the craft that you're good at. You figured out the formula.
Yeah.
So now that we kind of about the purpose of Chase and kind of where you came from with where do you feel like the impact for your work, like where do you vision that to go in the present time? You've already done a lot, but where do you feel like it's going to go now in the future?
My goal is to have the business kind of on autopilot, do a couple seminars a year. I want to be a full-time writer. I like writing a lot, but I want 20%. This is our end goal, is 20% of all of our profits are going to be building schools in South America. We're building specialized schools that are just for girls in Afghanistan.
Wow. That is
so
incredible.
The security, the infrastructure, all that stuff has got to be in place.
Wow. So let's talk. Wow. I have not heard about this yet. This is cool. Are you working with a contractor group to try to help, like, for, physical security wise, get that going? Or is this a vision that you haven't really gone anywhere else with it yet?
No, we have 3 companies that are lined up to start the building process. And we have 1 contractor company that's all locals. So it's not anybody that's from the United States. It's all Afghani people that are going to be hopefully able to do the security on this thing, but it's still in very much in development phases.
Wow. That's so cool, man. I love it. Oh, let me know what I can do more to support and get, get more attention on that too. And then also, if you want to go into a little bit more detail with that right now while we're here, what did that come from your vision, or did someone else kind of get that started for you?
I think that was me. I've had a lot of conversations with people who've seen things in Afghanistan that are way worse than I have, and they were really impactful. And I wanted to especially make a difference for those girls that are there. They can't go to school. It's they can't get an education whatsoever. And that was just something that I felt really called to do. And the stuff that's down in South America, I remember as a kid, my church used to do that. And I'd never been there, especially as a kid. But we used to get these little pictures back from them. And that was really cool. That would have little handwritten notes on the back of their picture. And I remember just feeling that. I've still got some of those photos. And it's kind of a meaningful thing. But either way, I think that's got to be a huge part of what you're doing. And I'm not going to get into the law of attraction stuff here. I can, but I think I'm not a very energy spiritual guy. I'm a very sciencey kind of guy. But if you feel like your money is just for you, or you feel greedy, or you feel bad about money, that's how it's going to treat you. And you've got to come to the point where the more I make, the more people I'm able to help. And you've got to have something there to substantiate that. And I struggled with that for a while, especially after I retired and I started making a lot more money. And I thought, well, I've been teaching this in the military. Why should I be making more now? And I really struggled with the personal side of finance and how my psychological relationship with money. And that was one of the biggest obstacles I've ever had to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing too, your line of work, it's, being through your training, it's hard to also put a price on kind of how to charge for that stuff too, for your clients, cause you kind of didn't have anybody really to go off of when you started this out, I remember dealing with that with you, with your company and trying to figure out that price stuff. But that's important, man. And hearing that you're putting this back into, especially outside, you're doing this outside of your country. You're doing this where just the simple necessities of survival, and I'm not talking about thriving, but survival is challenged in those two environments that you're speaking of to help bring these things. And that's a humanity thing. Obviously in life, the sphere of influence goes with what you have control over, because sometimes we try to involve ourselves with things that we don't have control over, and it can make you feel like you're treading water or sinking. But that's incredible, because that's outside of most people's visions of, let me help out my immediate environment. But you're thinking about places that you really physically don't even have a presence in, but you're giving that presence. Man, that's so cool. So how do you feel like you would, like let's talk about Afghanistan real quick, putting some schools there, and specifically you said female schools. Would do you have a vision down the road where like, I even want to go visit the schools?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be down there doing that.
That's awesome, man. All right. Well, I can't wait to hear more about this and see this. What impact do you want to make on the industry that you're in as a professional?
I think anybody that contributes to the field, I want to be the next brick. And, your work will always be surpassed by somebody else. But I wanted to develop something that was, an innovative piece where I actually made a contribution to the field and change things. And then, eventually someone's going to come along and put something else on top of that. And that's how we grow as people. All I wanted to do was contribute to the industry enough to where at the beginning we were just solving intelligence and interrogation issues very quickly. But now the system that I teach and the things that I teach, not just in sales, but I teach like the most advanced forms of persuasion and influence I've ever seen in my days anyway. And it's incredible that it really boils down to self-development. It boils down to a lot of things like empathy and social skills. And that's really what a lot of people need to learn. We tend to think, that if we look at the Fortune 500 companies and we took the top sales guy out of each one of those companies, would they be the ones who went to all the training schools, or would they be the ones with through the roof social skills and they can talk to anybody? Yeah. It's always that guy. But then when a company has sales problems, they go to this solution. And that's always fascinated me. We know it. We all agree. It's kind of a universal agreement that guy, the guy with social skills, the guy with authority, the guy with charisma, he can talk to anybody, he can read people very well, is always going to beat the guy with the tactics and book knowledge. But we tend to say, oh, we need more tactics and book knowledge here. We need a better script. We need, sure. When people call in, we need a better script to answer the phone so we can close them.
Yeah, so I like that, because I would say, to quote one of my former program managers, he said, that's the difference between skills and a pedigree.
Yeah.
He says sometimes the pedigree isn't what we need. So that's awesome. So have you felt like when you were in the Navy, did you get to learn from some incredible, like, individual, creative, persuasive guys that didn't have the pedigree? They just had the skills? Or has it been more on the outside now that you're retired, that you've been around like guys like Mark Bowden, Robin Dreek, who are some of the other guys that you do your little panel with?
Yeah, Scott Rouse and Greg Hartley on our YouTube channel. And we started it for fun and just hit 130,000 subscribers in no time.
Wow.
And yeah, but working with those guys is incredible, because it's the only time I'm going to get sharper is by either pushing myself way outside my comfort zone, which is hard to do nowadays after I've hit the 30,000 hour rule a long time ago, and just in this field. So hanging out with these other guys and hearing these competing perspectives is one of the best ways that I've been able to grow as a person.
Sure. Did the Navy have anybody like that for you to develop from? Or
I had a mentor who was a DOD guy, and he worked at DIA kind of stuff, but he was in his 70s, and he kind of raised me through my 20s. And when I was a young idiot, I had purchased this book called The Game. It was about pickup techniques and like the seduction stuff. And it was fascinating. At first, it seems like, wow, there's some real methods behind this. And I had this book. I won't say the title. I don't want to embarrass the author. I don't want to put anybody down. But I had this like pickup tactics book that was recommended on Amazon or whatever back then. And I brought it to lunch, and this guy and I are having lunch, and I was telling him about it, and he said, "Do you have the book with you?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got it right here." And I pulled it out, stuck it on the table, and he says, "Oh, you can flip through the entire book, flip to any page you want, and show me how the stuff in that book, or whatever technique you point to, is not a way to fake or pretend like you have your shit together." I was done at that point. I literally went through and looked through the whole thing, and I was finished at that point. I was kind of shut down.
You're like, where's a bonfire? I could throw this in.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you got to, real quick, DIA guy, you said civilian. Did you get to work with those agencies at all while you were in too?
No.
Man, that's actually, DIA is what I wanted to do after I got out, that's why I never got tattoos. Distinguishing marks were pretty important.
Yeah.
Bald head's obviously distinguishing mark, but I never got into the DIA side or the Intel side, but obviously you could tell, it's a very important subject for me. And I think just being around it as a Marine, being around the HET guys and the Intel guys and doing a lot of raids and stuff, just such an important part of, that's really the psychological part of anything, is how you show your, I guess, control, but also your tactics too. It's an important thing for the other side or those that you're supporting to know what you're doing through the
I've noticed
psychological
like
part.
those guys who are deep level DIA or deep level CIA operators are never zoomed in when it comes to problems and issues. So like there's some riot or protest going on in XYZ village, and you ask them about that and they say, well, this thing happened over in Hong Kong 2 weeks ago, and this laboratory in Russia was just attacked last week. And that, they'll connect they're zoomed so far out on problems that this little thing is not never this little thing right here. So it's always there's some kind of strange connection, which sounds like a conspiracy theory. Even when you read like those intel reports for that stuff, it's so far zoomed out and still connected. And those guys tend to see threads that nobody else would ever see.
That's interesting. It's kind of like the trunk line effect, where things are tied together. Man, that's obviously stuff that I could go in deep about, but let's not go down that rabbit hole. But that's very interesting stuff to me. Now, sticking on the pill part, the impact part, obviously I know, knowing you personally and knowing as well what you've already done, you're making that impact. And now shifting into something that is very important for you, the L part, the first L in the pill, the leadership part. Can you talk about perspective of leadership to the individual, but also big picture perspective leadership as an organization and as a team, and kind of where you got your creative ways to explain leadership from?
I don't know where they came from. I think it was just years of research. But I think on an individual leadership level, from a person, I'm called a mind control expert, but from a behavioral expert's perspective on what really makes leadership is everything that goes back to evolutionary psychology. So if we go back a million years, somebody became a tribal leader most likely because they were the most easy to follow. And there's a couple of things that we follow with leadership, and I think the biggest one is composure. And this goes back to all animals. If you look at dogs, if you look at cows, if you look at any mammal, it really draws back to composure being the key factor. And Cesar Millan, who is the dog whisperer, like somebody says, hey, my dog bites everybody.
Sure.
I need
That's
help.
me. I got 4 dogs and recently had to rehome one because he bit our neighbor.
Oh man.
Anyway, but yeah, Caesar is a friend of mine in the house on the TV.
Yeah. So he has a book, I think, and I've read lots of books on leadership, 100 maybe. And as a behavioral expert, I think Cesar Millan's book is the best book on leadership that's ever been written. And it's called Being the Pack Leader. But it talks about doing this in a way where you can't speak. There's not some cool phrase that you can say that makes you a leader. There's not some cool thing. It's your behavior, your attitude, and how you are on the inside is what's going to make you a leader or not. And in this book, he had the most profound quote I've ever read in a leadership book. And he said, humans are the only mammal on earth that will follow an unstable leader. And that really took me back, and showed me that stability is technically one of those things our brain, we're not consciously looking for that at all. This is way deep in our brain that's been, memorizing these things for millions of years. It's the same reason, we're born to communicate. We're born with facial expressions. We're born to be able to pick up our mouth, we cover our mouth if we say something stupid, cross our arms. All of these things are come in our brain right as we come out into the earth. But we're not born with language at all. So we're a lot more likely on a mammal level to relate to nonverbal things. And stability is one of those things you can see. Even if you turn the volume off on any conversation, you can see stability. You can feel it in a conversation. And I think that's really interesting that's something that we follow. And at the end of the day, if there's a wolf that's leading a pack of wolves, and it starts acting crazy and unstable, boom, taken out. sometimes within minutes, that thing is done, and there's a new wolf in charge that's more stable. And it takes that, and humans are the same way. And we evolved, and I wish I could unpack the whole authority thing here, but we evolved in a way where there's some internal traits that we follow for leaders, and we can sense those on an unconscious level. And I'll tell you the reason that we can't really understand what we see. We can't put our finger on it. We may think that, like, oh, it's because this, and this. But typically when we decide someone is a very good leader, we decide to follow somebody, it's a completely unconscious process. Down in the middle of our brain, there's no language processing capability. We can't speak English down in the mammalian or animal part of our brain. So this part that regulates fear and authority and social belonging is between your ears. So if you stick your fingers in your ears, you'd be pointing right at it. That part of the brain doesn't speak English. So when it sees something, it can't send you a text or like tell you what it's seeing.
Or an emoji.
Right. It can't do anything. So it gives us a gut feeling, and then our conscious brain, which is our human part of our brain, will rationalize why. It's just going to look for, oh, it's probably because of this, and this. So it's backwards rationalizing a decision that's already been made.
Okay, all right, let's pause right there. Okay, I love this stuff, as you know. I know you do too. So at what point do you feel like the DNA kicks in and it's survival mode?
What do you mean?
So when you tie the amygdala, or the animal part of the brain, to the frontal lobe, reasoning and judgment, where does survival mode kick in with I'll follow this uncertain leader, or I'll follow this leader that doesn't have structure, that isn't good, but I don't know what else to do. Like why are humans the only ones that do that?
We're the only ones that do it because we have that frontal cortex.
That's the difference between like a zebra learning to not go in this field because lions will chase you, but he goes back every day because his brain just says create space for this moment, but not remember it for the future.
Yeah. And when we make a decision to follow somebody and they turn out to be a piece of crap, we have the gray matter in our brain to be able to go, yeah, well, maybe he's not that bad because of this and this and this. So we can rationalize. The animals can't. Animals don't have the ability to ask the question, why? And that's typically how that works. And after, I've been doing this 20 years. I think there are 5 internal qualities that make up someone who's a really good leader. And I define the word leadership as the ability to produce followers through your behavior alone. That's it. And that is confidence, discipline, leadership, gratitude, and enjoyment. And when I say confidence, it's not hard. It's just a stellar reputation with yourself and a generalized expectation of positive outcomes. That's about it. And when I say discipline, the one sentence definition of discipline from a behavior expert is discipline is when you put the needs of your future self ahead of your own. That's it. So confidence, discipline, leadership. We know the definition of leadership. I'm producing followers through my behavior all by itself. And then gratitude. And this is just, I'm grateful for what I have. And then enjoyment of being always in enjoyment. This is the most magnetic human behavior. The most charismatic human behavior is enjoyment first. That makes us want to be with, be around, or follow other people is enjoyment. It's really interesting. I was driving around a very wealthy neighborhood here in Virginia Beach with my son, who was probably 9 or 10 at the time. And everyone waved. Everyone's smiling. Everyone waves. They're walking their dogs. The guy mowing his lawn. We're driving by and he waves. And they don't know us. They don't know who we are. And my son said, wow, they're all happy because they're living in this neighborhood. And I said, flip that around. They're probably living here because they had that enjoyment to begin with. And somebody on a spiritual level might say, you're attracting that to you because you're living as if you have that already. But on a scientific level, they're enjoying so much. They have that magnetic quality. It makes them a leader in their industry. It makes them a leader in their company, in
Sure.
their environment. And that's one of those things.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I would also add to that. That's kind of a active versus reactive perspective of how you interact in life. Where, for instance, you're in my turf. Instead of me saying, "All right, who's this guy?" I'm going to set the tone now and be a leader in energy. Hey, Chase, how you doing? Good to see you. I'm active instead of reactive to what you're giving me back.
Right.
Does that kind of a good perspective to think of that?
Yeah, I think that's a tremendous perspective. I think that's a great example.
So did your son remember that? You guys ever talk about those kind of moments? Because I know he's probably like, there's so many like, ding, 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 daddy. Yeah, I remember that, Dad. Thanks.
Yeah. We have a big sign right by our front door that says, "Today's thoughts are tomorrow's reality." So we try to reiterate that as often as we possibly can.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I'm going to add now, I was listening to a podcast you had recently, a few months back. And this is where I think you, as a retired, Navy enlisted guy, right? You were enlisted?
Yeah.
Right. Retired Navy enlisted guy. And part of my podcast theme is really, the first season is to bring on incredible veterans that have done incredible things in uniform that are now doing incredible things outside of uniform. And the whole purpose of that is really just to show that, hey guys, a lot of what we need is within. We've already experienced it, reflecting on our past to grow a better future. But using our past to make us understand that, hey, we've been through some tough times already. It's all gravy now. We're not getting shot at. There's no incoming. But if you could share, I heard you talk about the three, I guess it would be called dimensions of the self, which is the past, the present, and the future self. Can you talk about that and how specifically combat veterans and even just veterans can use that perspective of the three dimensions to really take ownership of your life?
You bet. But really quick, one thing that our brains are hardwired to do, and granted, when we get born into this world, there's already a shitload of software running in the background. It's built in. There's no admin access panel. There's no control panel to go shut some of this stuff off, like fear and all that. You will not meditate your way out of 600 million years of evolution. It's not going to happen, no matter what any instructor says. So the fear and all this social programming and obedience to authority and all of this tribal mentality and social fears, we're not going to get rid of that. But one thing the brain's looking for is evidence and proof. So if I want to trust someone else, I'm looking for evidence. Have they been a good leader so far? Are other people doing what they're doing? So our brain is looking to stack up a list of things. And we tend to do that for ourselves as well. In order for me to feel confident in this situation, well, maybe I don't have my uniform on, so I'm missing something. And that guy, I don't know if he respects me yet or not. I'm going to have to get him to respect me, and then I can feel a little bit more confident. And those people over there don't know who I am. They don't know my background. So our brain's looking for permission to feel a certain way, and it's looking for evidence that it's happened before. But it's total BS. We don't need any of that. So a person who's naturally, truly confident will give it to other people. So you don't need permission to be incredibly confident and sometimes overconfident. If you watch people who are overconfident have an advantage that other people don't. You watch the movie Catch Me If You Can with Frank Abagnale. Mm-hmm. He had zero skill, 100% confidence, and got a lot of stuff done, illegal or not. But those people have an advantage that other people don't. And there's no such thing as permission. Your brain's going to look for evidence. You're not going to get rid of that. It's never going to go away. But you have to understand that's just a little animal that was trying to keep you safe. It was literally, all those fears are there to protect you from saber-toothed tigers. There's no tigers. You just got to remember that and tell yourself, right, this fear is from, a saber-toothed tiger that was going to rip my neck open. a million years ago, there's no tigers around here. Everything's fine.
Yeah, it's your boss, or it's that person that sits across from you.
Yeah. And there's no actual threat.
It's
And
psychological.
with the three selves, and that sounds kind of metaphysical, but it's very practical. So your present tense self should be feeling two things. So I should be feeling gratitude for the actions that my past self took. I should be feeling deep level concern for the well-being of my future self. And if you look at someone who has trouble with, I have an eating disorder, or I eat 35 boxes of Krispy Kreme every day, or I can't go to the gym, or I don't pick up my house. I come home and there's a mess and it's because of me. Like I just leave my crap everywhere, or I get in my car to go to work and it's on empty. So many of our problems are because we placed the priority on ourselves instead of our future self. And one way that you can do this, and I guarantee it changes every aspect of your life, because somebody wants to quit smoking. It's not the present tense self that needs to quit. It's the past tense self that needed to quit for me. So we're quitting for the future self. We're not quitting for us. So all of our problems tend to stem from prioritizing me and not later me. And then later me is going to be pissed off. And then now what's he going to be feeling towards me? He's going to be pissed off. And there's no gratitude there. So it should be gratitude backward, concern forward. And one way to do this is to just continuously think about your future self. Go download one of those apps that makes you look like a 95-year-old man. Print out that picture and stick it on your refrigerator if there's some kind of eating thing going on. Do whatever you can to think about your future self, and start small. Before you go to bed at night, get the coffee ready, put the little thing in the Keurig machine, put the cup in under there and get it ready to go. Lay your clothes out. Tiny little favors for your future self, and it starts to become an addictive habit. And these are tiny things that lead to gigantic changes in psychology over time. And there's a lot of research on this thing called neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to just twist and adapt to new things. So when we start a new habit, I want you to just think of this like I'm walking through the woods. It's going to suck. I'm going to hit some thorns. There's going to be maybe a couple of twigs and stuff, little trees in the way. But every day I'm walking the same path. It goes from woods to just a smooth, clear pathway over time. And that's
that game trail. Yeah, the game trail.
Yeah. And that's how our brains work. We tend to think of it as a bunch of electricity, but it's actually physical. Like if you did an autopsy, you could see those pathways that are actually connected there. So once we start doing something new, the pathways start to connect. And eventually, since it's starting to connect, then it's going to start giving us dopamine. So then we feel good about it, and then it gets stronger, and then it gets stronger. So it's kind of an incremental improvement. But I mean, it could start with something as small as making coffee for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I like to always say, you got to crave discipline and crave it until it's just something that you must live with. And that's important. I literally, when I listen to that podcast that you're talking about now, those three things, and you give the exact analogy of the coffee maker. I literally, that night, I did that. And I usually don't do that because I don't know why. I just don't. And I have that kind of coffee maker that you literally can set it up, set a timer for it.
Yeah.
Boom. Everything's done. By the time you get up downstairs, the coffee is already made, smelling great.
Smells great.
And I did that the day I listened to that podcast for the next day. And I now have taken it even a step further. I told you my uncle, took his life in July. Just weeks before he did that, that's when I listened to that podcast. I started writing down in my journal my workout that I was going to do tomorrow. And I've literally been doing that now for over 4 or 5 months now, however long it is. And I don't know if I would have gotten through as well as I did when my uncle was my best friend. He was the guy there for me when I got back from combat. As soon as I got off the bus from the airport with all the Marines, he was right there in front of the bus waiting for me.
Wow.
He's like, we were like motorcycle buddies. I live in, the mountains of Virginia. and we grew up just being crazy motorcyclists together after I was in combat. But that shamble hit, it put me in shambles for a few weeks, but I stuck to my planned workout, and it helped me get through. So I just want to tell you, thank you for that message, just that message of invest in your future self, because literally that's what we have to look forward to. The past is real, but the future is what we can go get.
Yeah. And you can edit memories. And one thing, and I'll talk about editing memories since there's a lot of veterans here, a lot of combat veterans here. But one thing about discipline, when you see somebody that eats really well, they're like freaking kale all the time and like salads, they're going to the gym every day. They've got that like Instagram life, except they do it in real life. They're not faking it. Those kinds of people, we hear people say all the time, man, I wish I had that kind of discipline. I wish I had that much discipline. What you're seeing there is not discipline. That's habit. Those people only needed a teaspoon of discipline to get that habit started, and that neural pathway started connecting. So when somebody goes to the gym, you work out every day, it's not discipline. That's just something, it's a habit. It's a repetitive habit. So try not to think of it in terms of, I need so much discipline to do all this stuff. And just one thing at a time, small amounts of discipline will start a habit. And it takes one drop of water to start the Mississippi River. That's the only drop. And the next drop made the groove a little bit deeper. And it got deeper and deeper. But it all started with a single drop.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's a good perspective to add to that. Because I think, I'm glad you mentioned that, because discipline can sometimes seem, powerful and overwhelming for depending on where you're at in life right now.
Yeah.
In COVID times, it's been tough on a lot of people in different industries, and especially our kids. And you know what I do for work. We're going to have to unlearn a lot of this damage to our kids once we get them back to some kind of structured system again.
Yeah.
Nationally, there's a lot to unpack there for our kids. Some kids are going to come back to school and say, "Oh, I had a great time during COVID." Some kids, they're getting, I don't even want to bring up what's happening to them right now, but you can only imagine the horrible treatments they're having at home with mom's got to work and mom's boyfriend or cousins watching the kids. We got a lot of kids that are going through probably some of the most horrible times of their lives right now. And habit might be the number one thing that helps get a lot of these people out of this. So thanks for bringing that up, because I need to now rephrase kind of how I look at it too. Because discipline, that makes perfect sense. I mean, the other thing with life is, like Dakota Meyer, he's got this company called Own the Dash. Have you ever heard about that?
No.
Dakota Meyer, the Medal of Honor recipient.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So he was on a podcast that I was on. He was on episode, I think, 13, and I was on episode 20 of a podcast called Veteran Entrepreneur Podcast, which you would probably really like them. It's two guys, so it's kind of more fun. There's two different guys as the host and co-host. But Dakota was on there, and he talked about owning the dash is like, that's the life you get to live. There's one number, born, there's a dash, and there's one number, end. And that's your life. Because mortality is real. And Chase, you and I both know that. But owning the dash goes with, hey guys, that dash had a lot of days that doesn't show on that dash or on those dates of born and death. So having habit daily through life.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I like that.
And one thing with all of that, all the combat vets that are here, when we think about just from a behavioral perspective, our memory is between 80 and 95% fiction. It is a complete work of fiction. So what would happen if, without you knowing, if I went in and I just tweaked your 10th birthday party and put a clown there? Okay, let's just say that I went in there and I did that. Let's say I used hypnosis. I'm a board certified hypnotist. I can go in and edit memories all day long. But let's say I put a clown in there, and then a week later I asked you to tell me about your 10th birthday party. What are you going to talk about? The clown's going to be there. And if I strap you to a polygraph and ask you if a clown was there, Absolutely. A clown was there. It's in your memory. You remember it being there. It's not that someone added it. You remember that because it's part of that memory. And the scary thing is every time you touch a memory, just one time, like just now, you thought about your 10th birthday party, or at least a childhood birthday party. If you touch it, you edit it. You change the memory just by touching it every time. But how would you know if it changed if it's your own memory and you remember it a certain way? Because it's changing every time. And then when you look back on it, that's a solid memory. So no matter how many times, our memory is not a record book. It's an animal brain remembering things so we don't die later. So like, oh, I walked past this bush, I heard a stick break, and then a tiger came out. I'm going to remember that.
Right. Storage. Yep.
Yeah, and the more the volume is turned up on an emotion, the more details the brain tries to record, and it says, I'm going to save your life next time. I'm going to make sure all of this stuff is saved into the hard drive.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do now? I had that tiger attacked me. So I'm going to think about it every once in a while, once or twice a month. But every time I touch it, it's different. And I'm changing it and modifying it. And that's how all of our memory works.
See, now you're getting, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And if just touching a memory, just like touching it with the tip of our finger, just going back and thinking about it a tiny bit is enough to edit it and change it permanently. Because you can't go undo one of those things. It's a permanent file save. If that's enough to change it, why couldn't we do that on a conscious level when we want to change it?
Sure.
And one of the best things I've ever seen in my life, and I just want to share this for all the veterans out there, is something called trauma release exercise, or TRE. I know there's a lot of team guys, Navy SEAL dudes that do it out here in Virginia Beach. And it is one of the most profound things. As a behavior scientist, I've never seen anything like it that has that kind of profound, immediate impact on trauma, especially psychological trauma, but physical traumas as well. I would look it up. Look it up on YouTube, trauma release exercise.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Let me ask this question real quick. I kind of lost it when you kept going, and I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt. But if you could kind of share on this perspective I have, where I look at life, where you kind of mentioned it briefly. I can't remember. It was almost like I'm taking college courses now at ODU, and one of my courses is about communication, where it's constant. Obviously you know that more than anybody else. But when it comes to memory and the higher emotional moments of life, I call it the 1% of life, the things that give true super long-term memory, where it's like this tattoo in your brain.
Yeah.
And when it comes to combat veterans specifically, how any as a behavior scientist, any advice on those? There's some organizations out there, veterans organizations that works with combat veterans, and they try to help them store that memory and kind of lock it away and don't open it up. It's almost like it's this box. My perspective is, if you hide something, at some point, something will trigger it and it's going to be there. So my recommendation is to get through stuff could either be through you write about it. Let's say something owns you, put it down on paper. Maybe do a audio recording of you talking about it. But I feel like if you hide things, especially those 1% type situations, traumatic stuff, chaotic stuff, if you hide it, something's going to trigger it and it's going to still own you. Can you, I don't know if that makes sense at all, but can you talk about, like, what would you recommend for guys that have these things that own them, that they sometimes don't want to face them?
Yeah, and I will say I'm not licensed to provide psychological advice at all.
Sure.
But this is just what I would say to a friend, that if we're trying to lock away a memory, and especially if I'm doing a clinical hypnosis with somebody, the memory is powerful, right? So let's squeeze it down and stick it in this box. So it's like a spring. I'm going to squeeze this spring down to its little tight spot, and I'm going to stick it inside of a little Pringles can. And the next time that can gets opened, it's going to hit you in the face a lot harder than normal. And That might be a silly analogy, but it tends to happen that way. And one of the best researchers on altering memories and changing memories, not just what the memory contains, but the emotional relevance of the memory. And that's what's most important. Is her name's Elizabeth Loftus. She's got a great TED talk on false memories. And a lot of these doctors that work with this stuff will have people close their eyes, envision themselves in a movie theater, and then watch it on the screen. So that I'm removing it now one time from myself. I'm seeing it in third person. And now we'll do it again, and then the screen's going to be black and white. So now I'm taking another layer. So I'm just peeling back layers one at a time. And then I'm not going to be able to see the temperature. Then I'm not going to be able to hear any audio. And if you do this 100 times and just keep removing little layers of it from third person perspective, and sometimes even from fourth person, where you're in someone else's experience. So instead of like, if you, right now, I'll do this with you, but I'll do this with your listeners too. Imagine yourself in the shower this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you do it in third person? So we tend to do that when we look back on non-dramatic memories, but dramatic memories we experience in first person a lot more often because of the emotional content.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. I mean, perfect sense. That was a good analogy. I mean, yeah, perfect sense. And you know, I think that's like, I love third person perspective. I talk about that a lot in training and for instructor development as well, for training other guys and getting them developed. Because, you know, I've been a formal instructor now for 10 years for government organizations. And at first I was terrible. Like, I was supposed to be a counter ID instructor, and they hired me. I got there. They're like, "Oh, you're Marine combat engineer. You're not EOD." I was like, "Yeah, my resume said combat engineer. That's why you called me from my monster resume." So they come there and they're like, "Well, we're going to make you a marksmanship instructor." It's like, cool. But anyway, like, not my craft. I was a machine gunner, you know, not a marksman. But now for 10 years doing that stuff, I literally, the third person perspective is so powerful because it takes away the emotion and you see yourself from bird's eye view or from behind, you know, just like those video games our kids play.
Yeah.
And it gives you that chance to step back, and then the stress is gone. Dude, I'm so glad you brought that up, Chase. That's powerful.
Yeah. So there's three things. And if you don't like paying attention to things, just remember the acronym ADD. So angle, distance, and detail. Those are the things that we're going to start editing out. So we'll get our back away a little bit, then we'll change the angle, move away a little bit more, take away some of the details, and that emotional content eventually does go away. And if you really need to erase emotional content, one of the best therapeutic exercises, you need to talk to a therapist about this, but is something called EMDR. Mm-hmm. And this stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It'll just mentally go through the event. Some people make you do it verbally, but as your eyes are moving from left to right, and it's funny that some people have a problem that's complex, but the solutions typically aren't. But people want the solution to be complex.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, have you heard Jordan Peterson ever talk about teaching people to not be scared of elevators or the needles? You ever heard that video?
No.
I got to send it to you. Anyway, I think you would love the way he was trying to help people deal with these fears that just own them completely.
Yeah, I want to watch it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. So I don't mean to lose that thought you had. MDR.
Yeah, so it's a lot of times people tend to think I need a very complex solution. I need 11 years of whatever to fix this, or I need a 39-step process instead of a 2-step process, because it feels almost disrespectful to the problem.
Sure.
And there's a famous story. This guy named Richard Bandler, who's a therapist. This guy has these fears and phobias his whole entire life. He's been through, I don't know, 15 years, I'm guessing, of psychotherapy. And he goes to one of these seminars, and Bandler's up there speaking on stage, and he says, "Yeah, I want to, see if you can take away this phobia or this extreme fear I've got." And he takes it away in like 5 minutes. And the guy's like, this can't be possible. I've been in psychotherapy for 15 years and it can't be possible. I can feel that it's gone, but it can't, it's got to be more complex than this. So Bandler says, well, I can give it back to you and then take it away over the course of the next 15 years and charge you for all that time if you'd like, if that's a more suitable solution. So I think that there's a lot of things we can do pretty fast because we're not manipulating thoughts. We're not manipulating memories. We're not really editing memories and stuff. We're screwing around with a sack of meat inside our head. And it's a pretty simple little animal.
Sure.
And the stuff that we do to trick that little animal, like those little eye movements, who the hell cares why it works or how it works? We know that it does. And these are just little tricks. It's the same way, like you see the people pick up a blanket and then run and then drop it and their dog freaks out.
Sure.
We're tricking our mammal brain. We're doing the exact same thing.
Well, that's a great, I mean, like my number one subject that I train is active shooter, active threat response, for schools, but also for religious centers and businesses. And one of the most important things that I deal with is I give scenarios. I always try to ask people questions of like, what outcome do you want? What do you want from this? And if you remind people of the desired outcome, which you mentioned earlier in our DNA, we do not want to die today, period.
Yeah.
We want to keep living. So I asked that question, and it's so important to ask questions like that because it gets the mind. And I love just talking to people and almost like, look, guys, I know what your brain is capable of. That's like, as an instructor, that's like to my student audience, I talk to them like I know what they're capable of, and I don't give them energy that puts them down. I don't give them energy of doubt. I don't give them energy of give up. I give energy of thrive. And when you can do that as an instructor, and I guess you can call it an influencer, it gives so much power to your audience. And I give them scenarios of, okay, there's two things you can do with someone who wants to hurt you and take your life when they have a gun and you don't. You can either create space and get on your horse and ride away, or you can close space and counter, or like RCAT, counter, or redirect, counter, attack, takeaway. You could try that stuff. But when you're stuck in a box with somebody, they have a gun and you don't, you're not dead because they have a gun and you don't.
Yeah.
A miss is a miss. And law enforcement officers, this, statistically, I'll give Bo Bolgiano credit here, a known expert witness for many police shootings and military incidents. He told me in a training, law enforcement statistically misses about 28, they hit their target about 28% of the time with rounds fired.
Yeah.
So statistically, a miss is likely. So that's important though for people because guns create this fear, and that's the industry I'm in, the training of firearms and readiness and combat skills. But man,
so what you're talking about there is contagious confidence.
Sure.
You're transferring your confidence into someone else.
And is that something that I think a lot of the people we talked about before, that like the top, Fortune 500 companies and these top sales, a lot of them have that subconsciously.
Yeah.
And it's hard to learn that. It takes time, but it also takes, like I mentioned before, what outcome do you want? I want to continue to develop and build and thrive in whatever I'm doing. And I think that's contagious once the team and organization has that perspective and lives that daily, and subconsciously the team sees it because it makes that become the mission statement for the organization.
That's great, man. That's really great.
So as we transition to, this is an important part. I've been excited to hear about this, the last L in the pill for Chase Hughes, the legacy part. Now, legacy is a weird word for some, and I'm not going to tell you how I look at it, but as what legacy means to you, Chase, can you just share, like, as an individual, you talked about your kids. So as a father, as a professional, as a warrior, retired warrior now. All the things, all the fields of life that you've had impact over, where do you want, big picture, your legacy to be left?
I think I want the biggest left in my kids. And that's probably selfish. I think somebody who's more world-minded and more focused on the species would want to impact more people. So that is a very selfish thing. But I think I want to transfer the idea to my kids that we rise by lifting other people. And there's so many people that view life as a zero-sum game. If I want to be wealthy, I've got to make someone else poor. It's not true at all. That's like saying, well, there's someone starving in Africa, so I'm just not going to eat for 3 days. It doesn't help the other person at all. If it was a zero-sum game, you could starve yourself and that person would start eating. But that's not how it works.
Sure.
We can grow together. And I don't believe in competition. So like if someone came out and started teaching what I teach, I'd put a link to their website on mine.
You're like Apple. You're not Samsung. You're like Apple.
Yeah.
They're like, competition. Cool.
Yeah.
We're going to keep going.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think that's the thing. My company is based on that one philosophy that we rise by lifting others. And just last week, I was featured with Elon Musk in the top 20 CEOs in America.
That's congratulations. That's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Could you imagine 3 years ago, Chase, that, you just...
I can't even imagine now. It feels fake. It feels fake now. So I'll just admit it. And that whole reason I attribute to my success is helping as many people as I can get what they want.
It's awesome. So real quick, like the kid part, any advice on professionals out there that, for you, like you talked about how much you work, and especially with COVID times, it's challenging with are your kids still doing virtual school right now?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So can you talk about, because mine are too, can you talk about a little bit, just as a professional and kids being your legacy part, what are some tips right now that others can utilize from your experience and your craft to work on our behavior and development for, like you mentioned, our kids, and so that we're really putting them on a good path for success?
First, I would set expectations and tell them it's going to happen. Don't say we're starting today. Don't say we're starting tomorrow. Say this is going to happen in the future. The number one cause of depression in children is unmet expectations. Unmet expectations. So announce something's about to happen. We're not changing schedule. Second, trigger what they already respond to. Give them a schedule, a scheduled lunch, scheduled time in class, and then at whatever time you click on your Verizon app or whatever it is, turn the Wi-Fi back on, or let them go browse the internet again for a little while. So kind of make it as close to school as possible. And you don't have to have some Bluetooth speaker with bells playing on it or anything in the house, but make it a little bit familiar to school. That way you'll start getting that behavior back to where you're having them stay in class. They're not fiddling around with stuff. But I think finally, make them write thank you letters to their teachers, which kids don't do. And because they're concerned about themselves, I've got to be home, I've got to do all this. And the parents, I've got like 91 different apps that these teachers use, like Gargle Goop and Zappelzorf or whatever, and they've got some assignment in it. But then to open the assignment, I've got to go to this, and then to read it, I have to get this other program. The teachers are not responsible for that.
Sure.
They didn't build that stuff.
They're absolutely overwhelmed right now too.
Yeah. So have your kids understand. So start feeding that empathy into them that other people, this is affecting others. So they start to realize that we suffer in isolation. So it feels worse than it is until they realize that other people are suffering as well. Sure. Or other people are having a hard time too.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, one last thing. that I wanted to add is, and I thought of this just now. I like to challenge people because people challenge me all the time, and I'm like, Roger that, you know. And I challenge you because I think I found an incredible opportunity that you could really impact the field of awards for valorous actions on the battlefield. For instance, right now we're trying to get one of my buddies who was killed in Battle of Fallujah an award for his efforts. He was recently, I posted a workout of the day, a WOD for him on the day he was killed. And this guy responded from our unit that I didn't know because we got extended and stayed with another unit. He left and he's like, hey, for 16 years now, I thought about this every day and I wanted to talk to his family and blah, blah, blah. And let it be known, I was the last person to see him alive. And so 2 Marines inside this house were already just killed. And our buddy Arms was running in the courtyard to go try to rescue these Marines. And as he did, he was shot from a window, killed. And the squad leader he was attached to is the one that just came out and spoke about it. And so I got him connected with Brad's mom and dad. And this is just like within the last few weeks. And now I'm connecting him with Sergeant Major Kent to try to get Brad some award for his valor efforts to trying to rescue these Marines.
Yeah.
While he got killed by this Chechen ambush. But I challenge you, your skills and talking about piecing things together, and think about the difference between someone getting a Navy Cross versus a Medal of Honor, or, Silver Star versus a Bronze Star. It might be from because they have to grab, when they do this stuff in the military, it takes it very serious for the reports.
Oh, yeah.
You might be an incredible person that could volunteer your skills to say, you help talk to those those experienced individuals that witnessed it, to figure out the questions to ask on memory, on pulling those memories. And I say that because like Sergeant Peralta of 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, he was killed. He got the Navy Cross. I think he was a Navy Cross, and he got denied now for the Medal of Honor. They try to put in for that. He got denied because they're saying he was killed by friendly fire, but he still jumped on a grenade to save the Marines, even though he got killed by friendly fire in a chaotic moment. And if you look at other individuals, Jason Dunham, Kyle Carpenter, other people that have jumped on grenades, and just that effort got them a Medal of Honor. So you could be the link of your skill. I challenge you to look into this maybe, because I don't know if you have time or interest, but you could be an incredible person that could help these guys, these warriors, tie in their stories to figure out how they get the person they're trying to get the award for gets it because of how information is pulled from those that survived.
Yeah. I'd love to. I'll get with you offline about it.
I hope that didn't confuse that at all in what I was trying to explain.
No, it makes perfect sense.
I think you would be incredible for that. So anyway, where can people find you, Chase, on social media? Where can they find your books? What you want to give yourself a plug for both your books, and I'll put this in the show notes as well.
Sure.
But where can they find you? Social media, YouTube, whatever you got.
Social media is just Chase Hughes Official, and if you just Google Chase Hughes, you'll find me.
There's a weather guy. There's a sports guy up here in DC also.
Yeah, with the Wizards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not him.
I've beat him on Google search now. Thank God. But if you just go on Amazon.com and type in Chase Hughes, you'll definitely find the books, and you'll see them on ChaseHughes.com as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Chase, I want to tell you first off, again, thank you for your service to our country as a warrior, as an incredible mind that is very much needed in this world. And thanks for the future you're giving to so many with your knowledge and your books. And hey, man, you have a great week. Have a great holiday. And appreciate it.
Same to you, brother.
All right. Thank you. You too.